Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is episode 150. We've got 150 of these things. It's called Free Will and the Problem of Pain. A lot of times it's, you hear free will and the problem of evil, but I'm going to explain how they're very related in this. This is like, I'm taping this on the day after Christmas, 2013, December 26th. And before I get into the theme, as I usually do with the shows, I'm going to just basically explain what we mean when we say we have a free will, the belief in free will, and why it's important to understand we don't have a free will. I think, like in this episode, perhaps toward the end of the show, I want to explain why the fact that we have an unconscious makes free will impossible. I mean, there's various ways. The basic way, might as well just All right, the belief in free will is that we can do whatever we want to do, we can say whatever we want to say, think whatever we want to think, feel whatever we want to feel, and all this stuff is up to us, and nothing that is not in our control is making us do any of this, okay? It's up to us. Some people say, well, not everything is on control, but at least some things are. Okay, here's the basic explanation why absolutely nothing can ever be in our control, because it's just the way the world works, the way basic physics and logic works. Okay, the idea is everything has a cause. And some people some people say, well, not everything has a cause. Quantum mechanics, they haven't found causes for things. Firstly, the fact that they haven't found things doesn't really matter much, because basically we're only aware of 4% of the entire universe. There's another 96% that's known as dark energy, dark matter. We can't detect it, but we know it's out there. So that's kind of like looking for a cause to something in 4% of a room, whatever. So anyway, but even if certain things were uncaused, like some physicists try to claim, whatever, that wouldn't give us a free will either, because if our decisions and thoughts and feelings were uncaused, they wouldn't be caused by us. They wouldn't be caused by our free will. They're literally uncaused, okay? So you can't attribute an uncaused action, feeling, event, whatever, to anything. All right, but the basic reality, I don't want to confuse it. The basic reality is that everything has a cause. And a cause, what I mean is if something didn't happen to make something happen, it wouldn't happen. In other words, if somebody didn't turn on the lights, these lights wouldn't be on. If I didn't come here, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't learn language, I couldn't communicate, whatever. There's always a cause. So then the cause will always come before its effect, its cause and effect, and the cause is necessary. And again, and this is all right, one really good way to understand causality is to understand science. In science, our tool for understanding the world is what we refer to as the scientific method. And the essence of the scientific method is replication. You conduct an experiment, you get a result, all right? And you want to make sure you haven't made a mistake in your measurements or whatever. So you'll conduct the same experiment again, same conditions, you should get the same result. You do it 100,000 times, and if you get the same result every time, you know that there is a cause and effect relationship. So in other words, what I'm saying is the essence or guiding principle to the scientific method, which is our most powerful, authoritative way of understanding the world, is the principle of same cause, same effect. If we didn't have the same cause, same effect principle in science, to undergird and be the foundation of the scientific method, we couldn't do science. All right. So anyway, that's how fundamental this cause and effect is to science, to our way of understanding reality, and that's and it's also fundamental to reality. I might as well get into this just briefly. Okay. Just to explain how fundamental causality is to reality. There are some things in reality that you don't have to prove. They're so self-evident. For example, the first thing is that the universe exists. Reality exists. You can't conduct an experiment or present some kind of convincing argument that the reality doesn't exist. Okay, for all we know, maybe we may be a dream in some like huge, cosmic organism. Who knows? But notwithstanding, it's not like what we are, but we certainly, the universe exists. You can't refute that, and that's why in science they refer to it as a priori. It's like a priori knowledge. It's axiomatic. It's like it's self-evident. Okay. All right. So you got that. So like unquestionable, undeniable. The second a priori fact of the universe is that it changes. Because think about it. If the universe didn't change, nothing would be happening. I wouldn't be, doing this. You wouldn't be where you are. The Big Bang wouldn't have happened. This planet wouldn't have formed. Life wouldn't have formed. Nothing would ever have happened if there was no change, right? So now think of the universe. The universe, let's say, started with the Big Bang. Big Bang was this expansion of the universe outward, right, in every direction. So like you have a particle. Let's say you have a particle at, let's say, the second moment of the Big Bang. All right, because it's outward a bit from the first moment. And then like you see it or you detect it or think about it, right, at its third moment, right? So like basically the particle will have changed its position from the second moment of the universe to the third. And that change, okay, that's essentially what change is, like particles in one place at one moment and in another place the next moment. Now that change is an expression of causality, because like there are laws, there are principles, there are like forces of nature, like gravity and essentially momentum, whatever energies were in the Big Bang that caused the particle to move from its position in the second moment of the universe to its position in the third, right? So basically what I'm trying to say is that just like reality exists unquestionably and change exists unquestionably as the fundamental process of the universe, causality is unquestionable because change could not take place without causality. Causality is what explains change. Okay, that's an explanation of how change happens. All right. So anyway, so now we know what we mean by free will and why we don't have it. Okay, but the title of this is Free Will and the Problem of Pain. And all right, I want to go first through like how they describe it as the problem of evil, because like before Augustus of Hippo, about 380 A.D., he came to be known as Saint Augustus in the Christian Church. Before that, some people were saying, well, maybe we have free will. A lot of people were saying we don't, because like a lot of the Greeks, in other words, in Greek mythologies and in Greek religion and all, you had this idea of the fates. And the fates would control everything. Like one time this guy was told, well, the fates say you're going to die today. So like the guy goes off to like some ancient land thinking he's going to avoid fate. And like, so, death shows up there or whatever. So fate is the idea of things happen, and I don't want to confuse the idea of like fatalism with fate. Because sometimes fatalism says that, all right, if everything's predetermined, that means nothing that I do matters. It doesn't matter what I do. No, it doesn't mean that. In other words, what we do has consequences, but knowing that we don't have a free will just leads to better consequences and whatever. All right, so you got this guy Augustine rather, and Saint Augustine, and he's like grappling with the problem of evil, because like in Christianity and Judaism, other religions, you've got this idea that God is all good. Okay, God is all good. That's the basic idea. That's the premise. It doesn't, like Isaiah, I think 7:49 or 49:7 or something, he actually says, he quotes God, whatever in the Bible is saying, well, God says, like, I create both good and evil. So like, here you have God saying God is not just all good, God, but anyways, like, so according to St. Augustine, God is not responsible for evil, cannot be blamed for evil. So like he's saying to himself, well, if it's not God's fault, it's got to be our fault. But the only way he can like blame people for what we do is to attribute to us a free will. And the reason the reason he had to do this is because like in Christianity and Judaism, there's another kind of principle that goes along with the idea that God is all good, and that's that God is all powerful. Okay, so in other words, like the logic was that like, well, if God is all powerful, then what he says goes. So like, in other words, like if he's got all the power, you've got none. So that they came up with this idea of free will to justify getting God off the hook, blaming us. Okay, now here's the thing. Augustine, I mean, like, part of Christian, Judeo-Christian theology is there's this like agent of God, this creation called Satan or the devil or whatever. And his job, he actually supposedly works for God. His job is to tempt human beings, and then when we do wrong, to prosecute us before God and maybe punish us also, whatever. So like, in other words, what I'm trying to say is like Augustine could easily have said, well, all right, fine, you can't blame God for the evil, but you don't have to blame us either because you can blame Satan. Okay, so that way, that would have been great, because that way, we would all been, aligned together on the same side against this force that's, that creates problems for us. And that's really the reality. I mean, this is kind of like theological and personified in a certain sense, but essentially that's our reality. We're victims. We're on the same side. We have no control. Battling against, this force that makes things like not go the way they wouldn't otherwise. All right, so like the idea, so that's how the concept of free will became so pervasive in religion and then throughout the rest of the world. It was like to justify God's innocence. Again, if you want to look at it rationally, then if God created the universe, he must have created both good and evil. And there's other ways to go into this. So like, all right, so I want to go, so what's the relationship between evil and pain? Well, think about this. If there was no evil, there would be no pain. Okay, so like, in other words, evil by definition is what creates pain, because again, how do we decide when something's evil? It's evil if it hurts people, if it hurts, beings, if it hurts God, whatever. So like, I don't know if you can cause God pain, whatever, but if it hurts sentient beings, okay? So from that context, free will is an attempt to answer pain. And here's where we're going to get really kind of like, a bit metaphysical and just like speculate a lot. All right, well, let's see here. Okay, now, if we don't have a free will, okay, let me stay with the pain thing a bit longer. All right, no, just basically, yeah, that basically it's not, when we talk about evil, it's like evil is just really kind of like something that results in pain. So free will is really an answer to the problem of pain as opposed to the answer to evil. But here's where it gets complicated. So like, fine, we can't blame ourselves because we don't have a free will. I mean, Augustine was wrong, okay? The Bible is wrong about a lot of things. The world is much older than 6,000 years. A lot of things, actually I just read, there's this movie out, Zeitgeist, and it's produced by this guy, Peter Joseph, I believe. It came out several years ago, and it goes through like the beginning, well, after the introduction, which is like really long. It's kind of like, it's a lot of violent imagery in the introduction. I don't know why he did that, but then he kind of like explains how like the Jesus story, the Christmas birth, the Trinity, the 3 days dead and rising up and all that. I mean, the movie goes into how these were like stories that were borrowed, stolen. They were taken from previous civilizations, like the Babylonian civilization and the Egyptian civilization. These same accounts of like, the Son of God and like the rising on the third day. These refer to either like, biblical or previous myths, or they refer to kind of like astrological things, whatever. A bit of an aside, but anyway. So the idea is that all right, we can't blame ourselves, right? Because we don't have a free will. Then the idea is, well, fine. If we're not to blame, this is cool. If we're not to blame, then at first thought would say, well, then we have to blame God, okay? Because like God created everything, if we're not to blame, obviously the pain and the evil and the, whatever goes wrong in the world has to be God's fault, okay? When we do wrong, it's God making us do wrong stuff. Now, all right, that's a bit unsettling too, right? It's nice to overcome the feeling and belief that we have to blame ourselves and each other for whatever, right? That's a good step, right? But then we're left, we don't want to blame God either, right? I mean, we'd want to ideally believe that the universe, that God is beneficent, is loving, is caring, whatever, right? So all right, so within the context of free will, here's a way that we can also, in a certain sense, absolve God. And the idea has to do with this basic principle of causality that I started the show with. Think about this. If everything that we do has a cause, everything bad, everything evil, everything that creates pain, if all pain has a cause, and causality regresses, there are causal antecedents to everything we do that regress back in time, moment by moment, every cause having its cause, and that cause having its cause, and this chain of cause and effect regressing back into the past. Then what happens? Think about it. It regresses back to before we were born, certainly, back to before humanity existed, before the planet existed, before the solar system existed, before the universe, before the Big Bang existed. And here's the thing. It never stops going back. I know it transcends logic. I know, and this is kind of a guess. Since it transcends logic, we might want to conclude, well, it must have began at some point. This chain of cause and effect that led to everything, to the universe as it is at this moment, must have began at some point. But again, the reason I say transcends logic is then we're stuck with, all right, well, fine. Where did that come from? How did that arise? What caused that, right? So, all right, so granted, this concept of causality at its most fundamental level, and this doesn't relate to our not having free will, because, again, after the Big Bang, everything has a cause. So we're talking prior to the Big Bang. So the idea is, if presumably everything has a cause, you've got this chain of cause and effect that's going back in time eternally. It goes back eternally. And so if it goes back eternally, at least logically, you can never pinpoint a precise moment in time where God or the universe, however you want to see it, decided, well, I decide that this is how the universe is going to be, right? Because again, if you reach that point, you'd have to ask, well, what's the cause of that decision? Why, what led to that? So that, from this kind of logic transcending understanding of the nature of reality, because in this sense, reality completely transcends our ability to understand, we can absolve God of pain also. Okay, so all right, so what else? So, I mean, that's just a cool way to see how, fine, we don't have a free will, but that doesn't mean we have to, hold God accountable for all the pain and wrong in the world also. And then, but that leads to, some questions. All right, fine, you can't blame anyone, but then, the question remains in my mind is, why would the universe ever evolved to create pain? I mean, because again, pain is something that we're hardwired to not like. We don't want it. We're always trying to avoid it. We're trying to seek pleasure. And so I can't imagine, any kind of reason that the universe would have created. Because you might say, well, pain is there to kind of to prevent further pain. If we don't experience some pain, we're going to hurt ourselves more. We're going to hurt other people more. But that doesn't work, because you got to realize, if there was no pain to begin with, there would be no pain to avoid by whatever pain there is, okay? All right, so again, I don't know, apparently, we can look at this question of pain from the standpoint of evolution. In other words, I hope that rocks and the sky, and water doesn't feel pain. At least I hope so. It doesn't seem like they would be able to. But certainly sentient beings, we and other animals on the planet, feel pain. Okay, so how do you explain pain? I mean, naturalistically, you explain it by the fact that, evolution makes mistakes. There are mutations. It's like, it's quote unquote random mutation. You know, in other words, like there's a problem that organisms need to solve to be able to survive. Let's say it gets colder, gets, you know, the planet gets warmer, the planet gets colder, or there's like scarce food supplies and all. You know, organisms basically seek to survive and procreate, right? So basically our genes, within our genes, there, you know, these genes, whatever, the DNA, whatever, you know, basically our genetic apparatus is constantly trying to come up with answers that are going to help us, you know, in the present and in the future mainly, to survive better. So I mean, you know, in the sense of pain, we can say it was an evolutionary mistake, that we could have evolved the ability to address our challenges for survival and procreation in a way that didn't involve painful sensations. I mean, that stands to reason. In other words, like pain is a messenger, so it's easy to conceive of a similar neurochemical messenger that didn't hurt, that just, you know, it worked. Okay, so all right, we've got about 6 minutes. So all right, so why is this question of pain important? In addition to kind of like understanding why this belief in free will arose, and in addition to kind of like, I guess, absolving God for the wrong we do, in addition to absolving ourselves. Again, pain, you know, we're hedonic creatures, we're seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, but the problem is that, like, when other people do wrong, we blame them. When we do wrong, we feel the pain of guilt. There's a lot of unnecessary pain that comes about from this illusion of free will. Okay, if we didn't believe we had a free will, let's say everybody got by next week that free will is a complete illusion. Okay, so let's say the school systems started teaching this to kids, that, like, you know, we adults would learn this through TV shows and documentaries and books and all, you know, so like by 20 years, let's say, everybody on the planet was absolutely convinced that nobody has a free will. I mean, like, just like everybody's absolutely convinced that, I guess hopefully that we revolve around the sun. I don't think anybody's saying that the sun revolves around us. Everybody's convinced on that. So everybody's convinced nobody has a free will. What does that mean? That means that, like, we no longer have any rational justification to blame anyone for anything. I mean, you know, we'll recognize, you know, that people do wrong, but what happens is, like, a lot of times, because of the illusion of free will, we not only get angry, a lot of times, you know, when people do wrong, our response is anger. Anger is, like, in psychology, a reaction to a perceived injustice. So what happens is, like, we say to ourselves, all right, this wrong shouldn't be happening. And so we get angry, but the illusion of free will causes us to direct our anger toward that other human being, or toward groups of human beings. And, you know, when we do that, that creates, like, wars and all, or toward us when we think we did something wrong, and that creates pain for us. So the idea is, like, to the extent that everybody's on board, that nobody has a free will, there would be absolutely no rationale for blaming anyone for anything. Again, we could still perhaps become angry, you know, that we do wrong, and certainly make, you know, take steps to correct the wrongs. Again, we're not going to do away with the morality. We're not going to do away with reward and punishment, even though the rewards, I think, are going to be, you know, they won't be as severe, because, like, a lot of the or the punishments won't be as severe, because, like, a lot of the punishment under the free will thing is, like, it arises from hatred. It arises from seeking revenge, you know, from attributing free will to the person and saying, well, this person of their own free will did this, so that they deserve to suffer. Whereas, like, if we understand that whatever the person did, they absolutely had to do it, you know, fine, we might, like, need to separate them. We might need to train them, like, to not do that, you know, to kind of, like, condition them like they do in psychology, you know, operant conditioning, reward and punishment. But we wouldn't be doing it with hatred. We wouldn't be doing it with afflicting more pain than is absolutely necessary. It'd be a much kinder, you know, and far more intelligent world. So that's the idea. That's the idea. I mean, like, to the extent, you know, people say, well, it doesn't matter that we, you know, fine, we don't have free will, so what? No, it's so everything. So everything. And, like, if we want to create a better world, a brand new world, this is one very powerful way to do it. Our world has challenges, with climate change and all. All right, I get into this once in a while, and it is kind of important, all right? Like climate change, I just read recently, we're above the 400 parts per million mark in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that's, so basically, that's not a good sign, and apparently we don't have the politics to reverse it anytime soon. So unless God willing something miraculous happens, that we all grow a very strong conscience, begin to do the right thing, then we're in for like challenging decades, because of climate change. Each decade is going to become more challenging. To the extent we meet this challenge, all of us believing in free will, everybody's going to blame everyone else. We're going to be blaming the rich who are preventing us from doing what we need to do about climate change. We're going to be blaming our politicians for not warning us, or our scientists for not coming up with solutions. We're going to be blaming ourselves and each other for all this stuff. Whereas, like, to the extent we overcome this illusion of free will, we'll meet the future saying, fine, nobody's to blame, okay, but to the extent we're not blaming each other, we free up our energy and our minds to fixing what needs to be fixed, to addressing it in a way that's far more, because again, if people are blaming each other, they're going to be at each other like our today's world. If to the extent that everybody stops blaming each other, there won't be a rational reason to feel hateful, negative feelings toward others. It would be impossible to do that rationally. All right, so and that's very important. All right, so the idea is, like by overcoming this illusion of free will, we could create a much, much better world. Okay. All right, I think that's it. So like anyway, I'm going to do more shows. I've got like Anel's coming back. We've got a taping on January 3rd. He's going to come back. We're going to do 3 shows. And I might be ending this show at least for a while after that, because I want to get onto this. I used to do a show on happiness, and I want to get back to that because, like, after 150 shows, it's going to take the world a bit of a time to get this, and so I have to wait this out. All right, so thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week to explain why free will is impossible and why it matters. Thanks.